Hi, Jeremy.
Hello.
We're so excited to have you today and to see you. And it's been such a long time since we got to take your yoga class at Alive and Well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
been an interesting, you know, journey in the last 2 years for everybody, of course.
yeah, yeah. And you've gone, well, so I'm so excited to have Jeremy here. We have our show, Mindfully Austin, where we like to connect with various entrepreneurs and businesses in Austin that really they uplift humanity with what they do for a living. And you have just taken you're such a great teacher. You have such a wonderful voice. I love your podcast and your YouTube channel. And you just really have a good way of teaching in um, such a, so I don't want, so I want to say soft and gentle, but I don't want that to come across like the way, I mean, it is very strong and empowering with a very soothing, that's a better word choice, a very soothing quality. And you've taken this pandemic and just made it work for you,
Yeah.
launching into your online and teacher training and all the good things. So why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about your background and what brought you to yoga, what brought you to this business?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so I guess I can go all the way back to growing up as a child and like not being exposed to anything like this. And I actually grew up like above a bar. My mom was a bartender, and I never met
Oh.
my birth father. So an interesting, difficult childhood, and spent a lot of time alone. We lived in the inner city, and like, I'd hear like gangs and stuff outside my window, and my mom would just tell me like, stay inside, don't go outside. So I spent a lot of time alone, and I feel like that kind of cultivated like a meditative approach to everything, and like this observer kind of approach to everything. So
Hmm.
I felt like I was meditating a lot. Like when I eventually took a meditation class, like 2006 or so, I was 20, and I was like, oh, this is familiar. I'm used to being in stillness and quiet. So actually, that first meditation class, I just wanted to laugh the entire time for some reason. And I was like suppressing my laughter and joy the whole time. And then at the end, I told the teacher, and he's like, no, you laugh if you want to laugh. Like that's part of the, being true to what's present for you. So I grew up like not exposed to health and wellness or anything like that. And my grandma's diabetic. So I just saw a lot of health issues, a lot of money issues, and a lot of violence and gangs around like the neighborhoods I grew
Hmm.
up in. Like my sister got jumped when I was a kid. And
Hmm.
so nothing like yoga and meditation really in my life, but I was kind of cultivating a meditative approach to things. And then when I was a teenager, I was fortunate, like we moved to like a more suburban place, and then I tried a weightlifting class there. And that feels like the best feeling I'd ever had in my life, like lifting weights, exercising. So I was like, I want to do this more. So I started to do the weightlifting class, and then eventually after high school, like joined a gym, and eventually going to the gym, I'd see they had a yoga class there, and I'd kind of peek in, like, what is that about? And then I was like listening to all this philosophy stuff as well, and hearing about how wise these yogis are, and like all the powers of doing yoga and all the benefits that come from that. So I was open to it, and I got really into Alan Watts, and you probably heard of him, right? Yeah.
I have not, I've never really studied with him or, his work, but
Yeah. Yeah. He's not alive anymore, but he has a ton of recordings from like the whatever 60s or 70s, whenever he was teaching. And I listened to all of those I could find. And he was talking about how powerful yoga was. I remember the first time I heard him talk about it, I still remember like where I was, and like the feeling I had of like, this is something I need to check out. And so I finally tried that class at the gym, and I think I was the only guy in the room, which turned out to be like the way it often is. And I didn't really think about that though. I just thought like, I want to try this thing, and it feels great in my body, and I want to do it again, and I want to come back. So I started to make it like a regular thing, and actually just like 2 or 3 days going into, I'm going to go tomorrow, I'm going to go the next day, like 3 days into that, the teacher who I really liked ended the class saying, all right, everybody, thanks for coming. That's my last class here. I'm moving to Colorado now.
Oh,
And I was
oh
like,
no.
wait, you're my teacher. Wait a minute, come back. So I went up to her afterwards and was like, I really like your class. I'm new to this. Like, I want to learn more. Like, have you ever recorded your classes or anything? Like, if you record your classes, I'll pay you. Like, I want to like keep practicing. And she's like, I don't know. Like, I'll try. I'll see if I can figure something out. And that was the last time I ever heard from her. So I had to kind of go out and like find a new teacher and find, some other way to keep practicing. So I tried other classes, and they were good. There's nothing wrong with them, but I just didn't quite find like my teacher who I really resonated with for a while. And I knew if I wanted to keep practicing, I wanted to be more in like a yoga community. And I also knew I wanted to move out of Minnesota at the time because it was like contributing a lot to a depression I was kind of struggling with, and yoga was helping a lot getting out of that depression. So also into music and playing guitar and writing music. So I looked at a few different places to move, and Austin was just always at the top of the list. And there was already a great yoga community in Austin, great music community, and nature and like sunlight instead of being in Minnesota, where it's very dark a lot of times of the year and very cold, of course. So Austin was the clear choice for me. And I moved to Austin without having ever even visited. I didn't know anybody in Austin. I never visited, just packed everything and moved. And found a place to land, and eventually got a place and everything. And within a few months, I was in my first yoga teacher training, which I didn't plan to be a teacher, but I just knew I wanted to learn more. So I got into the teacher training, found my first teacher, Matab, who I think you know, Hannah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The
I remember,
infamous.
what's that?
The infamous.
Yeah, right. So I remember going to like an info session there to like check it out. I was like, okay, I'll see what this teacher training's about. Maybe it's a way to like learn more about my yoga practice. And they, this is the first time I realized there were styles of yoga, because I was just like doing like random videos I could find online. And there was actually a really good site that I followed called Yoga Today. That was one of the first online classes. So I was doing Yoga Today videos a lot. And but yeah, I got to this info session at Yoga, which is no longer around in Austin, unfortunately. But they get us into the session, and then they're like, all right, so everybody who wants to learn Kundalini, go to this room. Everybody who wants to learn Hatha, go to this room. And I was like, what does that mean? What are those words? I just want to learn yoga. And I was like, well, this old hippie guy seems cool. I'll go with him. So that was Matab. And he's like, he just seemed like some cool old hippie guy to me. So I was like, I'll learn from him. And I went in there, and I had no money. And he's like, I told him that I was like, this sounds great. I don't know if I can afford it right now. And he said, don't let money be the reason you don't do this. If you want to do it, we'll figure out something. So they had a scholarship program, and I got into that, did the training, 9 months. It was like the best 9 months of my life. Like, I was a high school dropout, never finished anything before that. I finished teacher training, and I was like, felt so accomplished, and like I found the thing I was looking for. And shortly, like right after that, I was like set out to like do the thing that I wish that my first teacher did, of recording her classes and sharing them. I didn't feel ready to like, I wasn't at the skill level to do that really, but I knew that was something I wanted to do. So that's what set me into like on the path eventually of, in 2018, 10 years after that first class, I created the Quietmind Yoga podcast, which was exactly what I was looking for. Of like, I just hit record while I was teaching, and then put those recordings out there for people to practice with. So that's
So
how I got to
cool.
the business.
What a great story. So you've been teaching for how many years now, Jeremy?
Since 2011, and so 11 years.
Okay. Wow.
Wow. I didn't know that. That's really, really cool. And then, you were completely set up for pandemic life
Yeah.
after that.
Yeah, very fortunate that I figured it out in 2018 before 2020.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's in
definitely.
practice.
So, so what it like, so you learned about yoga, you learned how it made you feel, you learned you wanted to provide a service to people by getting your classes recorded. And along the process, meeting your students now you've been teaching for 11 years, seeing how it's impacted them, has that helped shape your big why? Why is it that you show up for others every day in this way? Why yoga? Why this path?
Yeah, yeah. Like again, growing up in that environment of like seeing my grandma diabetic, going to the hospital all the time, um, like and realizing later on that there's a lot of health stuff that is preventable. A lot of health issues are preventable, and then learning like the number one cause of death still is heart disease, which in most cases is preventable and based on diet and exercise and lifestyle choices. And my grandma was my closest family member. She actually raised me for a few years early on, and I always felt like super close to her. And she was always very happy and like not really complaining, but she had so many health issues, and I saw a lot of them were preventable. And like, she was happy and content the way she was. Like I wasn't trying to change her or anything. She didn't really want to change, but I knew I didn't want to end up in those health issues myself. And I did end up in like a pretty heavy depression in my early 20s, and like kind of struggling to find my way, not having a father and no father figures really. So as I was preparing for this interview, I thought back to something that really was pivotal, was reading this book called Spark in 2008 that came out. And it talked about basically how exercise is like taking an antidepressant, and it has all these benefits for health and wellness. And we're all pretty aware of that in the wellness kind of community, but just reading that in 2008, it just opened up my eyes so much of like, if I don't want to be depressed, I should probably be exercising regularly. And if I want to feel like mentally clear and physically good, like I should be exercising regularly and meditating. And it just set me on this path of like, that's who I want to be. And I don't want to be having health crises and in poverty and struggling throughout my life like I saw growing up. And so that's kind of my why. And like knowing that just by sharing these things, I might be able to help somebody make some small life choice that could potentially lead to them not having to suffer and go through these like chronic health issues and things like that.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, and just showing up, the way that you do authentically for them, I think can just set an example of lifestyle choices, which is awesome. Um, and what do you hope that your clients, well, I guess you just sort of answered this, but like, what do you hope that they'll feel by working with you? I mean, it sounds like you just kind of answered that, like you hope that they'll be inspired to make healthy choices in their life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
And like the biggest thing for me is always pointing people back to themselves and not pointing them to me as the person with the answers. It's because the nature of the teaching yoga is like, you just go into a room and somebody else just tells you what to do for an hour. and and it's like, move your leg here, put your arm there, and do this, do that. And there's no dialogue. So the dialogue space for me is like, you could do this or that. And I always give people options. And I've been in plenty of classes where like people know I'm a teacher, so they're wanting to challenge me more or something, but I'm not feeling it that day. I need to I'm feeling like my body needs to relax or do less or, de-stress in some way. And then being told like, I said to do that, like I'm being like the teacher essentially saying that I'm doing it wrong, and like they're wanting to impress me or something, or push me, or think that I need more because I'm a teacher or something like that. So I've been on that side of it, and many other versions of that, of seeing how it feels to essentially be told to listen to some external teacher, authority, external thing, rather than listening to my internal intuition, listen to my body, have this relationship to self, and how awful that can feel to like not have that space to listen to self. So I provide that in my classes a lot. Like that's probably the biggest thing that I focus on in the class is like, you can do this or that. You can, if you want to just take child's pose the whole time, great. I'm not going to tell you not to do it. So it's really like you have the answers within you. And like I think everybody does, if they're just kind of cultivated a space to like listen to it and given permission to act and listen from that place. So that's what I provide in my classes.
Yeah, you do. You really do. And I love the way you articulate that because, isn't that what yoga is all about? The joining of mind, body, and spirit through our breath and our own internal awareness. So, yoga has become so over saturated, and I think sometimes the meaning can get lost. And I know I've not been to a huge amount of your classes, but the classes that I was able to take, I could really feel that. I could feel a sense of, almost a little bit of playfulness and curiosity in what we were doing. Like you had us do something, and I love learning new things. I've been doing yoga since 1994, and any class I take, I still learn a new thing. And you had us in pigeon pose, and then we did like a thread the needle in pigeon, and I'm like, oh, this is fun and interesting. I've never done this before. So, and it was also just an invitation as well. It was like, ooh, if you want to try doing this. And I'm like, ooh, I am curious about that. I want to try doing that. So I love that.
I have a question,
Um,
Jeremy.
yeah,
Are you 100% online now? Like your weekly schedule, is it all online, or do you teach in class anymore?
Yeah, everything since 2020 in March has been completely online. And I currently just teach one live online class a week on Mondays. And I have a yoga membership site that has hundreds of on-demand videos, recordings of past classes.
Gotcha.
that's great. I want to circle back to your teacher training moment. So because I did my teacher training through Yoga as well, the Hatha program.
Yeah.
And just enjoyed some fun Kundalini classes. So you did a Kundalini training. When did you pivot to the Hatha? Because I haven't seen you teach Kundalini, and maybe you do, and maybe I just missed that, but.
Yeah, I taught Kundalini for 3 years exclusively. And so I'd actually had always been doing like Hatha yoga and some Kundalini, it turned out, as I learned, once I learned what the styles are. And the main teacher I was following before Matab online, her name is Sarah Klein. She's still active and on that site, yogatoday.com, which I have no part of, but I learned a lot from them. And she would like teach Hatha and then throw in Kundalini stuff and like mix it up, and didn't really call it one style. So I was already doing both. And I did the Kundalini training, and I was a member at Yoga. I was we're doing work trade. I was cleaning the floors there for a couple of years, and I would go to every class I could. I was just like sometimes 3 classes a day. I was in classes all the time. So taking every style, and mostly Kundalini for a couple of years. And I am more Vata in nature, like of the Ayurvedic doshas. So I tend towards feeling cold in my hands, and digestive issues and anxiety tends to be where I lean towards. But I was in that depressed state, in that more Kapha state before doing that Kundalini training. And Kundalini I found was like so good for breaking out of depression and feeling too heavy, feeling stuck. And it kind of lifts you up out of that and gives you like I haven't done many drugs in my life, but what I feel, it kind of accesses the same parts of the brain that are already there, that kind of get you out of old ways of thinking, old patterns, old ways of seeing things. So that was extremely helpful for that phase of my life. And then once I got more into my sort of Vata nature, doing all this like fast breath work and quick movements was destabilizing for me. And I was starting to feel ungrounded and unfocused and like too much vata energy in my life. So I realized I needed more embodiment, and I moved towards doing more hatha practices, and without any sort of issue with like the Kundalini tradition or whatever, because Matab was very much like supportive of me doing what's right for me. And he even told me, like, if you go immerse yourself in Kundalini stuff, I don't think you'll really like it because of how much it's like, this is what Yogi Bhajan said, and this is what Yogi Bhajan would do, and this is the way you do it, and this is the recipe essentially. And I don't resonate well with that, and I really prefer to listen to inner authority and listen to intuition and encourage students to do that. And a part of the Kundalini as taught by Yogi Bhajan tradition is you follow his recipes that he created, which are incredibly effective and powerful, but there's not a lot of room for like exploration, the curiosity, like you mentioned, Hannah, or like just sort of what feels right for me today in this moment. And I had an experience early on in my teaching where I planned my whole class to do this whole shoulder series that's in Kundalini. And then I had a student in my class, two people come to that class. One of them was up for anything. The other person said, oh, I just had a shoulder surgery, so I can't do anything with my shoulders today. So it's like in that moment, like, well, I don't know what to do now. I've got to make something up on the spot. And like, that's what I teach my teacher training students to be able to do. And that's like so important. But that's where I realized like all those things together, all the limitations of Kundalini yoga, which are just like not resonant with my path, and like needing more embodiment, needing more expression and creativity, and to be more spontaneous and present with the students of like, what do they need today? And how can I be prepared to just serve them spontaneously? Because I don't know what they're going to need until I'm sitting in front of them.
Right. Yeah, I love that. I completely resonate with that. So you mentioned teacher training. When did you tell us about your teacher training program? And I also don't want to forget to hear more about your Ayurveda stuff. And then we'll talk about the event on the 21st, which we're so excited about.
Awesome. So I started to create my teacher training program in 2019. I had done pieces of it. I'd done workshops and events and stuff. And, essentially everything that I do is for a younger version of myself. So there was a younger version of me who wanted to figure out how to deepen my yoga practice and maybe teach. So, I just, what do I wish existed at that time? And then I create that as best I can and trust that there's somebody else who's in a similar spot now who could benefit from that. So I was very, very fortunate to create that online training in 2019 before the pandemic. But there's a lot of work explaining that to people, like, what do you mean you're learning online? How do we do that? And then, 2020, everybody gets it now. So I was very lucky to be ahead of the curve a little bit there. But yeah, anytime like making a big life change or decision or trying to put yourself out there in a new way can be scary. And there was a lot of like vacillation that I had to work with in myself of like, I shouldn't do this. I'm not ready, or maybe I should. I need to do this. I'm definitely going to do it. So I'm really glad I eventually went with it and just said like, I'm going to do my best. And like always, like trust that somebody somewhere is in a similar situation that I was years ago and can at least benefit a little bit from this, hopefully.
Yeah, definitely. And then tell us about your Ayurveda practices. So I would love for you to just share for people who don't know what Ayurveda is or who've never heard of it. Maybe they don't know what Vata and Pitta are or Kapha. And so just tell us about that. And do you incorporate Ayurveda in your teaching regularly, or is that just a specialty workshop that you do, or do you share about Ayurveda in your teacher training as well?
Yeah, so the Ayurveda means the science of life. It's considered the sister science of yoga and Vedic astrology, so Vedic astrology is the other big thing that I teach. I have a podcast called Quietmind Astrology, and then I have the Quietmind Yoga podcast and the Yoga Teacher Training podcast. So I have three. So Ayurveda, Jyotish, the science of light, and yoga, essentially the practice of union of body, mind, and breath. So those are the three of the main teachings of the Vedas, which were around 1700s BCE, before the current era. And that is one of the oldest spiritual texts in the world. It's over 3,000 years old. And it teaches about yoga, it teaches about Ayurveda, and teaches about Jyotish. And those three things together have been really essential to my own growth and what I share and teach. And also from my teachers and Matab and others that taught those things. So we really need all of them to some degree. Like understanding yoga is understanding our body and mind. Understanding Ayurveda is understanding energy and like the seasonal changes and how food affects us and how anything that we interact with affects us. Including like technology or nature, and everything has a dosha. So everything in nature and the universe can be distilled down to the elements, and there's a whole system for that. I teach in my teacher training and actually do infuse that into everything I teach, but I don't usually talk about it directly, but it is a big factor. So it's really useful to just know your dosha. I actually have a link on my site. It's called quietmind.yoga/dosha quiz. People can go to and get their free dosha quiz.
Great.
Yeah. So basically there's Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, which is Vata is the air and ether element, Pitta is the fire and a little bit of water, and then Kapha is the water and earth element. And everybody is predominantly one or two or sometimes three. So you have a default nature, and then everything you do can either move you into balance of the three, out of balance. Drinking coffee is going to increase Vata and Pitta. It's like fiery kind of energy, more energizing. It's a little acidic, right? Or eating potato, like a sweet potato. It's in the ground, it's rooted, it's grounded. It's going to carry more earth energy, more kapha, right? So every single thing in the universe can be seen through this. Everything we do, every movement we make. I'm talking kind of fast intentionally on this because I know it's like online and our attention is a little bit more distractible online at times. So keeping like the dialogue going helps it be a little more connecting and keeps our attention a little bit more, right? And that's a little bit more of a Vata thing. So, having times like after this, I'll be in a more kapha place where I'm just like quiet for a while. So being aware of those things throughout the day is so helpful.
Yeah. How did you like all that wind last week? It was torture for me. I was slathering oil all over my body like constantly.
Right.
Yeah. Very deregulating for me,
Hey, Jeremy,
my Vata self.
I have a question for you. So you were saying like knowing how technology affects you. And I personally, I can feel that very strongly. So I'm wondering, do you have any tips or how do you balance that out? Because you're online a lot, right? You have 3 podcasts, you have an online website, I'm sure lots of marketing on social media. And I feel like when we're self-aware, you can really feel the weight of screen time. So how do you balance that out?
Right. Yeah.
Great
for sure.
question.
Yeah. Thank you. So for me, I just try to be aware of it. Like, I happen to really like technology. And as a kid, like I couldn't wait. Essentially, like my dream device was an iPhone as a kid. Like I couldn't wait for something like that to exist. And
Oh boy, I feel really old. Hold on. My fan.
well, there weren't even really cell phones. I'm not that young.
Sorry.
There's like pagers, when I was a kid. But yeah, so like the technology is really fun and it's very stimulating for our primitive bodies. We're not really evolved to adapt to it. So it's really just listening to the waves that happen within you, like feeling for like when you're eating a meal, like you feel that sensation of fullness. And I'm always trying to tune into that sensation of fullness in anything I do. Like, I've had enough. Right? I've had enough watching YouTube. I had enough looking at my phone. The issue though is the way that technology is often designed is a little bit malicious.
Mhm.
They just want you like glued to that thing as much as possible.
Yeah.
And then they can sell advertisements. And, I'm aware of the back end of that too, of like how that works and how that can be helpful. It's like somebody's looking for yoga stuff and I want to advertise to them. But yeah, it's like we got to be aware of, is this serving something or not? Am I full on this?
Mhm.
Sometimes it feels great. It's like de-stressing to just like scroll through Instagram, see what people are up to. And then you hit a point where it's like, okay, I've actually had enough. And like really listening inward, because the whole thing is designed to like basically not be able to notice that you've had enough and think, oh, one more scroll, something, who knows what's going to happen. And like there's a sort of randomness that really stimulates us. So having a morning meditation practice really helps prime myself and can help you prime for the day of like just noticing, like if you sit down and 5 minutes feels like an eternity, then it's pretty good sense that like your mind is really busy.
Mhm.
And if it feels like you can't even sit down, then you're probably really overactivated. And that's a good sign to like really take it easy that day. But it's waves. It's like, I don't want to be a Luddite and just say like, no technology. I'm just going to live in the woods. Because there's so many amazing benefits to it. And like most of my students are not in Austin. A lot of people in Australia and around the world who I would never be able to reach otherwise.
Right.
And so the technology is awesome. And we got to just be aware of like, there's a saying like, if the product is free, then if the service is free, then the product is you, so essentially, yeah, Facebook, Instagram, all this stuff is free, but the advertisers are paying for your attention,
Mhm.
which is, I'm not saying that's an evil or negative thing. It's just like to be aware of like, that's the situation. It's like, oh
Right.
yeah, I can use the service for free, but that means that advertisers can pay to advertise to me. Just like television, So it's just something to be aware of when you're full, when you actually can benefit from time online and connection and even distraction. And when it's like kind of taking over and actually not serving you and you're serving it essentially.
Mhm. I love how
Yeah.
you put that. Thank
Yeah. Well, I know we've been on a while, but I want to definitely talk about our event. So I'm super excited to have this event on the back patio, yoga with Jeremy and some sound healing under the meteor shower. So
Amazing.
that will be really cool on April 21st. And if we have very limited seating for that, so if you're interested, please email. We'll put the link in the description. And I want to make sure also we get, we will make sure that all the things that Jeremy mentioned and all the links to all his 5 million podcasts will be there. His YouTube channel is great. I am a subscriber. Ooh, look at those beautiful
Singing
bowls.
bowls.
I was wondering
I'm
what trees
so
you're pulling
excited.
out. They're beautiful.
Yeah. And you know what? This is actually the tote bag I got when I signed up to my first class at Yoga in 2011, I guess.
Oh,
So there's the Yoga logo on there.
oh, I love that.
Yeah. Says, so
My daughter,
go ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
Well, it says yoga is the practice of quieting the mind. And that's where I got Quietmind Yoga.
Yes. Wow.
Oh, I love that.
Cool.
My daughter wears, well, because I was about 20 pounds lighter when I started my teacher training back in 07 with them. And so I have like a size 0 little t-shirt and it doesn't really fit me anymore. So my little 9-year-old wears it all the time to sleep in. It's so cute. And it just reminds, I love that shirt. It just reminds me of how wonderful that teacher training was.
Yeah, that's so sweet.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
after seeing your bowls, I am so excited about this event.
I'm so excited. Megan, where are we going to go? Because we need to participate.
I know,
Like,
I'm
I'll
like,
go
I
on the
better be
steps.
able to participate in this.
Maybe we'll float in the pool. Everybody else can have
We
the
can get
deck
like a
space.
floating yoga mat. I mean, whatever we have to do to participate.
Yes, we can float. I would love to float. We can put the paddle boards in the pool.
Yeah.
We'll just float on those.
I mean,
That'd
whatever
be
it
great.
takes to take Jeremy's class.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah,
best way to do
we'll just-
Shavasana right there.
Oh,
Right.
that sounds amazing.
Well, we're so excited, Jeremy. Thank you so much for sharing your
Yes, thank
stories
you
with
for your
us.
time.
And yeah, we're very excited for the event and to just hear more about your growth and evolution in your business
Thank
and
you.
life. All
Yeah,
right.
I appreciate it. Thank you.